So this isn't the kind of video we typically do on this channel. It might be a little too basic, or it might be a little too specific to this car. But I think that we can talk through a lot of those things. And well, the reason I want to do this is because there's a lot of people who follow this channel that are just cutting their teeth on these older cars. And there's a lot of things that are just unclear to them or a bit of a mystery. And since we've got to give this thing a tune-up or at least a freshen up, I figure let's just set the camera up. We'll shoot the whole process and I'll talk our way through it, and I'll point out where there are differences that you may come across on your specific car. Now, hopefully at the end of this you'll get something out of it if this type of thing is new to you. So here's the situation. We bought this Barracuda last week. We've put about 20 or 30 miles on it, just scooting around town over here. And it runs okay, doesn't run spectacular. It needs a tune-up, it needs a freshen up. Now we know that it has fresh spark plugs in it, but I didn't put them in and I don't know that they're gapped correctly. And also they are new plugs and it does have a few miles on it now. So I should be able to get an idea what's going on inside the engine by looking at the plugs, reading the plugs. Now also we're going to change the wires because they're using I guess it's a generic set of straight boot wires on them, and they're rubbing up against the exhaust manifold here. So we're going to use a set of big block Chevy wires on this small block Chrysler. It's like the perfect match. So I picked those up. I got a cap and a rotor. So we'll go through all of the basic steps. Now, we do have a difficulty, it's not really a difficulty, but we do have a situation with this particular engine in this particular car having to do with giving it a tune-up. And it's the fact that this is a mid-1970s 318 that they put into this 1965 car. Now, they used the correct harmonic damper and the correct timing cover that came with this 1970s engine. So the timing marks and everything are where they're supposed to be. But they used the water pump that comes with this car. And the problem with this now is that the water pump outlet, the hose that comes out of the pump, well, it's on the opposite side. And so in this application, the timing marks are completely obscured. So we're not going to be able to put a timing light on this thing. I'm going to power time it, and we did a whole video on power timing. I'll put a link to it in the description. So that'll describe the process that I'm going to go through later on after we're done going through the parts. So I figure let's just go for it and we'll talk our way through it. And I'll try to do this without any edits. We'll try to do the whole thing real time. I'm already burning down a bunch of time. I got to get to work. All right, so the first things first, we're going to change the plug wires, the cap, and the rotor. So we're going to get the old plug wires and the old cap and rotor off of here. Now, generally speaking, if you're dealing with an American V8, regardless of where the distributor is located on the engine, typically the position for the #1 spark plug wire on the cap is going to be pointing towards the #1 cylinder on the engine. So in this case, so now we have to double check. So here's our #1 wire, and here it is on the cap. So yeah, it's biased towards the #1 cylinder. So we could just pull these all off. We know that the firing order on this engine is 1843657.2. We know that the distributor rotation is clockwise. That's all we need to know to just pull all the wires off. If you're not sure of yours, like most firing orders are stamped someplace in the intake manifold, or just hit Google and look up the firing order and wire position for your particular engine. So we know that this is set up where it should be. So let's get this off of here. So let's put this off to the side. So this is going to be our first look at the distributor. Now, this engine originally had points and condenser, but it's been converted at some point during its life to electronic ignition. So there's no points or condenser to go through here. But I've done many videos on points, and setting them and so on and so forth. So you can search that also on this channel if you're curious how to install and set points, both with a feeler gauge and or with a dwell meter. But we don't have that situation here. We have just a basic stock electronic ignition. Now before I get into the rest of this, like I said, this is my first look at the distributor. So I'm going to do two things with it. The first is that I'm going to check the vacuum advance to make sure the vacuum advance is working the way it should. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the vacuum line off this carburetor, like that, and watching the breaker plate on the distributor, I'm going to suck on the hose. And it moves. Okay, you guys want to see this, don't you? All right, hang on. Okay, watch the plate at the bottom. Okay, so we know that that works. Now this is also very important. You'll find a lot of times, especially with older engines, that the mechanical advance weights will be stuck. So you won't have any mechanical advance. So what we do here is we grab the rotor, and okay, this one is free. Grab the rotor and just make sure that you can move it and it springs all the way back. All right, so we know our advance weights are free. It doesn't return all the way completely, but that's okay. We know we have functional centrifugal advance. Now, okay, with the rotor off, this is a step that a lot of people don't bother with. This has to be lubricated. The mechanical advance mechanism has to be lubricated. So different engines have different circumstances. The Ford and the Chrysler are very similar in that the centrifugal advance weights, the mechanism is underneath the breaker plate. GM cars have it above the breaker plate, so you've got the weights. As soon as you take the rotor off, you can see the weights. These have to be lubricated. You can use white lube on the ones that you can see, like on the GM cars. On these Chryslers and Fords, down in the center of the shaft is a pad that's intended to hold oil. So what you do is, we're just going to give it a drop or two of motor oil, not too much. Okay, that's it. Now I know you couldn't see, but I put like a drop and a half in there. So that'll keep her lubricated. That's a normal thing to do every time you do a tune-up, any type of service, ignition service. You always check and or lube the advance weights. All right, let's get these spark plugs out of here. Now, like I said, they're new, or at least I think they're new. They appear to be new, but I don't know that they're gapped, and I don't know the internal condition of the engine. So we're going to pull them out, give them a look. Okay. All right, well, they obviously want to grill it into place. Oh, that's terrible. I gotta get you over here. What did I do? Okay, hang on. Now when we pull the plugs out, well, they actually got a couple of miles on them. All right, we pull the plugs out, we're going to keep them in order here. Sorry about that. We're doing this on like a 95-degree day and the camera's in direct sunlight, so it just overheated and shut off. So I tried to create a little shade situation for it. Let's see if we can go a little further. All right, back to where we were. We got three of our four. Oh. We got three of our four plugs out on this side. And yeah. All right, so this is what we have here, okay? This is all four that came out on this side look the same. So we've got essentially a brand new spark plug, and we've got signs that this thing was running really super rich. Now, I don't know if that's because the previous carburetor, the one that was on here, might have been flooding over and causing this, or if they had the choke set wrong, which is the most likely situation. So these plugs are okay. I'm going to clean them, but I'm not going to put them in right now. I have another set back on the shelf, and I'll grab those and we'll gap them and throw them in. But yeah, new plugs, you know, that's why you can't always judge a book by its cover. You look down at them and you say, oh, it's all brand new and shiny, and you pull it out and it's like, ooh, okay, that's dirty. And that may not clean up, you know, it may not clean up perfectly during normal use. So let's just throw another set in. Get them out of the other side. I'm not used to talking. Oh. I'm not used to talking when I do stuff like this. So, bear with me. Luckily, they didn't gorilla these plugs in. A lot of guys just, and spark plugs are not supposed to be tightened that way. These were tightened about right because they have a crush washer on them, and that crush washer holds the tension. You don't really have to go crazy. You're not supposed to go crazy tightening them down. So let's screw these out. Oh, like I was saying right before the camera took a dump on me there. Yeah, that's the other one. They're all the same. Is that these plugs are the ones that take the 13/16 socket. Well, it's 13 turns to pull them out. That's the number of threads. It takes 13 complete revolutions to pull them out. Yeah, they're all exactly the same. That one's very carboned up. Now that plug is unlikely to clean up under normal use, so we'll definitely change these. Yeah, that one too. So, all right. So now on the positive side, I don't see any oil fouling or anything like that. And the engine doesn't run like it's got a miss or a low compression situation in the cylinder. There's no smoke comes out of the exhaust. Even when it's ice cold, the motor is fine. So I'm not going to bother with a compression test or anything like that. But at this point, if you pulled these plugs and you found evidence of oil fouling or you've got smoke out the exhaust, now's the time to do a compression test. But not necessary on this. So let's get these out of here. Let me go get the new plugs and we'll gap them and we'll throw them in. Okay, so we've got our brand spanking new NGKs and our handy dandy spark plug gapper. So let's talk about spark plug gap. Now, for an engine like this, one is just a stock engine and a stock car that's going to just be driven, right? There are no tricks that you can do with these spark plugs or any trick spark plugs you can throw in here. You know, the ones with like the 10 ground straps and the arc welder stuff that goes on. Yeah, you will find zero benefit, regardless of what the advertising says. You'll find zero benefit using anything like that. The only thing you need to be completely sure of is that they're gapped at the correct gap for your application. So now in this one, which has got like an 18 to 20,000 volt coil, 8-to-1 compression, old school motor, The gap is 35 thousandths of an inch for this. Now check the spec on yours. Yours might be different, but this one here is 35 thousandths of an inch. So we've got our handy dandy spark plug gapper, this old school thing right here with the wire. And all we're gonna do is just pass the wire through. Most come pre-gapped, but you got to check them anyway, because sometimes just through the corrosive, packaging or whatever. Sorry about that. The camera had heat stroke again, but I'm holding up okay. So we got 3. This is number 4. As I was saying, check them anyway, even though they're usually pre-gapped out of the box. You never know. So these are good. Check the other side. Hello. Okay. That one was a tad tight, off by like 1,000th. Let's see. That's it. Now we can throw them in. So, yeah, like I said, you leave the side gapping and the indexing and all of that to race cars. Just straight gap them what they're supposed to be, providing that you're using the original. The rest of the ignition system is, as intended. So this has got original coil and all of that. This isn't about hot rod tune-ups. This is just about classic car and making it run the way it's supposed to run. All right. Now, also, some people put anti-seize on their plugs. Do not ever put anti-seize on the plugs going into a street engine. It does conduct electricity, and it will migrate down the threads into the combustion chamber, or into the combustion chamber side of the spark plug, where it will lead to detonation and all kinds of other things. So do not ever put anti-seize on your spark plugs going into a street engine. Certain race cars, yes. A spark plug going into a aluminum cylinder head, yeah, you can anti-seize those, and there's a whole procedure to doing it the right way, but we're not going to get into that right now. Just, you don't need to put anything on the plugs before you screw them into the engine. Now, before you put a wrench to these things, you want to make sure that you've gone at least 2 or 3 turns by finger. Let's go to the other side. This side is a little difficult. So let's use the socket. Where's the socket? Can't really get your fingers down in this one, but you want to go 2 or 3 turns like that before you actually try to wrench it. Come on. Oh, this one's not catching. There we go. Okay. Now, put this back up here. So now we'll just screw these in by finger until they get cute, and then we'll throw the wrench on there. What do I mean by cute? Just where you're not able to turn them easily by finger anymore, which is probably going to be about 1 full turn or so from done. And now I can't think of anything to talk about. What a boring video this is. But I bet you somebody somewhere is going to pick up some tidbit from what we're doing here. Okay. And again, you don't want to gorilla these things. The turns that I'm putting on there are basically against the crush washer. Okay. On the other side. That good? Yes. See, this is why you put them in by finger first. Oh, let's do that on these. I can't see what the camera is showing because the sun is just glaring at it. There we go. I'm sorry. All right. And that's all the plugs in. So now, cap and the rotor. You always want to give the rotor a look to make sure that that tang right there is up, because this has to make contact with the center post on the cap or it'll arc and it'll burn this away. And that can actually cause a lot of damage. Because once this fizzes away, the spark is able to jump to any terminal that it wants to. I actually had somebody kill an engine exactly because of that, because this tang was laid down like this. I'm not making contact. So you want to make sure that the tang is up like that. Seat that down good. Now I'm not throwing away the old cap and the rotor, because they functioned okay. And they didn't have any obvious defects to them, so I'll just throw them in the trunk just in case. And you always give these things a quick look over to make sure there's no obvious defects on them. That one looks all right. You see, as I'm putting it down, I can the spring pressure from the rotor is pushing it up a little bit, so you want to feel that. Come on. Ah, sometimes these clips. Okay. This cap fits a little tight. So this cap fits the body of the distributor tighter than the one, or tighter than it should. Like, it should be snug. But this one here actually wants to be pushed down. So make sure if you have trouble pulling those clips up, because quality control isn't really what it used to be. And like 2 thousandths of an inch difference in the inside diameter of this will keep it from going all the way down. So if you have trouble pulling the tangs up that hold this in place, double check, triple check to make sure that the cap is seated all the way down on the distributor. If you really have to force it, then return it. It's a defect, because it will crack. This one seems okay, it's just a little snug, and I'm just putting it out. Make sure that it's pushed all the way down and that the tangs go on easy. Okay, and our wires. So as I said, these are for a big block Chevy. And the reason I chose these, show you, coil wire, put that there. The reason I chose these is because they have these angled, it's like a 45-degree angled boot. And for the driver's side, these are almost necessary to clear the exhaust manifold when you're not using the stock valve covers. So the stock valve covers have looms on them that hold the wires in place. But if you're using valve covers that don't have those looms, then these 45-degree angle ones are the way to go. So the distributor is biased to the one side. So we're going to find the four shorter of the long ones. Let's see. That one. That one. That one. And that one. We'll use these on this side. And we'll use these on this side. Okay. Out of here. All right. Now we know that 184366572 is firing order. We already checked that this post right here, pointing closest to number 1, is in fact number 1 on this distributor. So now we just got to run the wires. Now, when you're running ignition wires, it's important to try to keep them separated. Use wire separators wherever possible. Don't ever bundle them together with, perfect example right here. Don't ever bundle them together with a zip tie like that. There's a trick where you make wire separators out of zip ties. You can go ahead and do that, or just get regular wire separators, but never bundle them tightly together like that, because over time, moisture and dirt gets into that bundle and it'll start to arc off, the plugs will start to arc off to each other. So, all right. So our longest here, 1, and you want to route these things clear of any obstacles. So we're going to go under and behind the throttle linkage on this. A little difficult getting these things snapped in place. Make sure you feel the wire snap down onto the plug. Okay, so there's 1. Okay, we're going to do one side at a time, so we're going to count 1, 8, 4, 3. Okay, so maybe next time I try this, I don't do it in bright direct sunlight in the middle of summer. This thing just keeps having heat stroke. All right, so where were we? All right, so we got 1 in, so I'm going to go 1, 8, 4, 3 over here. So I'll take the next longest one. I'm pretty fanatical about the way I route spark plug wires. And right now I'm just laying them in there tentatively, because I'll probably fiddle with them later and definitely put wire separators on them. Usually you buy wires, spark plug wires, and they come with separators, but for some reason there's none in this package, so I'm going to have to go dig around for a nice new set. I think I've got them. Okay. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5. That's it. This is all just laying them in there right now, and I'll make them nice and neat and organized later. But you get your major routing out of the way now. Okay, so there's 5 and 7. Make sure these things are plugged all the way in. A lot of times people will leave them to where they're just barely making contact, and that will burn the wire. So you have to make sure that these things, the metal contact is plugged all the way into the cap, and the snap is all the way down on the plug, on the spark plug itself. So that's our basic plug routing. See, I put them under this part of the cable. This moves and this moves. So I ran the wires through where there's no movement. And then just like that. And I'll add separators. I'll definitely put one separator right here and have the wires in order. So this way, at a glance, I could tell, you know, if, let's say we're going to pull plugs out of this thing, I could just pull all 4 wires off and not really have to go through the whole deal, you know, the firing order on them to make sure that they're in order. So I will put one loom right about there that'll have plug wires in order. Now let's get the other side. And these are the 4 longest. So let's go by order here. 1, 8, so our shortest. Four. So we're going to go for our second to longest. Four, 3, 6. So we're going to go for this one. Factory advance sign back on. 5, 7, and then 2 is our last one. And again, I keep repeating myself, but after I'm done doing this, I'll go back and I'll neaten these wires all up so that they're not rubbing against anything. They're making as little contact with each other as possible. Like I said, I get a little crazy with spark plug wires. And then our coil wire. All right, all firmly pressed in place. Okay, so this is, I'll get a little nutty with that later. All right, so we're almost ready to fire it up. But one of the things that you want to look at when you're doing it to it on one of these cars is a choke. So you want to start this with the car as cold as possible. Man, the light is crazy here. You want to do this job with the engine as cold as possible. Preferably it's sat overnight so there's no extra warmth in the intake manifold and you get an idea where the choke actually is. So here, the engine is ice cold. It's sat overnight. And I don't have the choke completely closed. You see? She doesn't want to close completely, which means that I have to make an adjustment. Now on these, see, a lot of carburetors have a heat stove that you turn and you adjust. Most carburetors do actually. On these you have this arm right here, this piece of linkage. So what we want to do now is we want to lengthen this piece of linkage by straightening it. That's exactly how these things are done. They're straightened and bent. And this is what, okay, so now we're closing all the way, but it's a little bit more tension than I want, okay? So I'm just gonna bend this a hair, like that. I'm gonna say that's close enough. Now that's only part of it. The other part is this, the choke pull-off. Now again, many different varieties of choke pull-off, but this type is vacuum operated and it uses this piece of linkage right here, and you see this bend in the linkage right there. That's how you adjust the pull-off. So what you want to do is you want to pull this all the way back as if vacuum was being applied to it, okay? Just like that. And you see how far it's opening the choke. And that's about right. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna open that up just a hair. So I'll show you how you do that. We have to get a flathead screwdriver. You'd think I would have prepared myself. Aha, a flathead screwdriver. So what you want to do is take the blade of the flathead screwdriver and you insert it right there and just give it a little bit of a bend. Just like that, okay? Now we'll do the same thing. We'll pull this all the way open and you see the pull off. So when the engine is first started, before it's running, that's the position of the choke. Now as soon as the engine starts, vacuum pulls back on this and the choke opens to that position. And that's absolutely necessary. If there isn't enough opening, let's say it only opens that much, okay, with the pull off, well, it'll flood the engine. It'll run super rich. And if you have it too much, where it opens at, let's say, that much, it'll stall because it still needs a choke. So the purpose of the choke pull off is, once the engine is started, to open a choke just enough so that the choke is still on, but it has adequate air to run. And these are super important adjustments to make and check every time you do a tune-up on one of these cars. So let's light this thing up. Put you down. I did it again. All right. So let's try this one more time. I'll put this down. We got a choke closed. Everything is all nice. We give it a pump or two of gas. Looks pretty good. So let me get out of the way here. So the next step with this is let the engine warm completely up. By the way, did you see what happened there? I had set the choke pull off, and now right after I started it, when the engine was still cold, I pushed down on the choke a little bit to see what would happen, and the motor slowed down. And then I opened it a little bit further and the motor slowed down. So we ballparked the adjustment on the choke pull off, and it turned out to be exactly right. Really, really important when you're dealing with these older carbureted cars. This is it's like lost art stuff. It's very simple to us old timers, but I mean, this stuff was obsolete before a lot of you guys were even born, so it's understandable that you don't understand how it all works. So as I said before, the timing, we're going to have to do that power timing on this because the marks are completely blocked by the lower radiator hose. And after it's completely warmed up, and I mean completely warmed up, then we can make our idle mixture adjustments. But we're going to leave that here with where we're at. Okay, yeah, fuel filter. A lot of you guys, get that glass fuel filter off of that before you burn down all of Tennessee. I've been using those things for 30 years. And they're just fine. I mean, I use whatever happens to be handy, okay? So if it's a metal one, I use a metal one. If it's a plastic one, I use a plastic one. And if it came with one of these glass ones with the replaceable cartridge, I use them too. I have never, ever, ever had a problem with one. So if you do have a problem, you're probably doing something wrong. But anyway, I'll throw a fresh cartridge in there. And that's it. the basic old school tune-up. I hope there was something in all of that you got something out of. I'm going to take this thing for a ride. I'll see you tomorrow.